Welcome back to the Bentonville Beacon podcast, where we're sharing stories and advice from the leaders behind the meteoric rise of Bentonville, one of the fastest growing and most dynamic cities in the United States, nestled in the Ozark Mountains of Northwest Arkansas in America's heartland. Hey, I'm your host, James Bell, and I am thrilled to share the studio today with Phil Libin. And Phil is a serial entrepreneur. If I had to make my bet, I'd say many of you have used at least one of his products. He is the co-founder and past CEO of Evernote. His latest two ventures are All Turtles and mmhmm. And All Turtles is a globally distributed product studio, while his newest venture, mmhmm, was birthed out of the pandemic, and in its latest round raised $100 million from SoftBank Vision Fund and Sequoia Capital. Phil, welcome to the show.
It's nice to be here, but meteors don't rise, man. You can't have a meteoric rise because meteors fall. That's what they do.
Oh boy,
we need a different way to talk about Bentonville.
Sparking Bentonville's. Oh, that's actually really good considering one of our local companies.
Spark logo. Sparks rise. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, meteors only fall.
I'm going to make myself a note, and from now on, we're going to spark that rise. I love it. Phil, what should our audience know about you?
I don't think anyone has to know anything about me. I am just here because fled San Francisco about 2 years ago. Was just looking for someplace nice to spend a few months, kind of wait out COVID for a little bit. Just got an Airbnb, thought we'd be here for a couple of months and then move on, and just kept extending it, and then building a house and then other stuff. And I guess now we're from here. I just registered to vote here, so I guess that makes it official. I am now from here.
Most definitely official. Well, I definitely want to talk about that in Bentonville and about you getting here and your experience. I'd love to know about mmhmm, but let's start with All Turtles first.
Yeah.
What's it all about?
Well, All Turtles is a product studio. The idea is I've spent about 25 years in startup land, mostly in Silicon Valley for Evernote and a few other places. And I just think that the kind of VC startup Silicon Valley treadmill is pretty broken. It's pretty inefficient. Mm-hmm. For lots of reasons, and we just wanted an alternative. We wanted a better way to focus on making important products with really talented people with kind of as little of the nonsense as possible.
That's great. Well, as a software engineer turned founder and CEO turned VC, a true serial entrepreneur, I guess I would say that you should know, having lived the life in the valley about this, you're one of those mythical creatures that we hear about, and here you are.
Bigfoot or something, yeah.
Sure. So talk about what is what does the company do? Where in the world did the name come from, and how are things going?
Well, mmhmm is a product to give you kind of video communication superpowers. We started it as a joke, honestly, about 2 months into the pandemic. So, we're working at All Turtles. We had a few different projects, and the pandemic happened. We all started working at home. We all went to, remote, and it sucked. I mean, everything was just kind of dreadful and boring, and it was back-to-back video calls. And by May, we just started goofing around, just trying to make ourselves laugh a little bit on video. So I had like this old camping towel that was green, and I stuck it behind me, and I used it to put pictures and stuff on Zoom and backgrounds. And we hacked up a little prototype, thinking that it would just be something to keep ourselves entertained for a few weeks until we got sick of it. But every time I used it for something, people really liked it. And so I texted a few people whose product opinions I really respected, and everyone said, hey, you're onto a real thing. And so we realized pretty quickly that what started as a joke actually has the potential to fundamentally change the way we communicate. So we started a company, raised some money, hired some people, and so on.
Awesome. Man, I was doing some adjunct work with a university, and I think I could have kept, my graduate students were okay, but I feel like I needed a tool like yours to keep my undergrad students engaged. And I can't wait to see more of it here in a moment. Well, let's talk about those communication superpowers that provides. Will you share more with us?
Yeah, I think the main philosophy that we have, and this is really, a big part of this is my thinking that's really got sharper when I moved to Bentonville and living here is we're kind of calling this movement the out of office world. And when I say out of office, I kind of want that to sound like I'm saying out of jail. Like there used to be this thing that dominated the very center of your life that severely constrained what you could do. And now you're free from it. You're out. And we think it creates this, we call this the OO loop. OO, it stands for out of office. We like stupid names in case you couldn't tell already. And the basic idea of the OO loop is that for creative people, for knowledge workers, for people who work on their laptops, if you improve the quality of life, that leads to an improvement in the quality of work. So if you let people, have time to spend with their families and take care of their health and live in a nice place in a good neighborhood and not commute for 3 hours every day, like if you do those things, for creative people, it improves the quality of their work. And when you improve the quality of work, you get more success, more satisfaction, more money, which you can then invest back into improving the quality of life even more. And so you get this virtuous cycle of, improved quality of life, improves quality of work, improves quality of life, improves quality of work. And it kind of keeps spinning. And this is the cycle that can make the world better for hundreds of millions of people. And so when I came to Bentonville, I wasn't originally planning to do any work here. I mean, this is just a place I kind of thought, well, I can live anywhere because my job is fully distributed. Let's live in a nice place. But what I actually realized is I was actually being far more productive than ever because it was such a nice place, because I could pick which environments to be in and things like that. And so we made this product give you the kind of communication superpowers that lets you be fully productive wherever you are so that you could be where you really want to be, not where you have to be.
That's very cool. I mean, you're living what you preach. I feel like you're kind of like a good version of the Pied Piper. You're leading the workers out of the office, unshackling them, and giving them a chance to make their lives not be locked to where their office is, right? The real opportunity to work anywhere they want.
Yeah, and I think it's a more humane way to live.
Yeah.
People spend a lot of time talking about life-work balance, work-life balance, and I think just that framing is already a problem, because even when you frame it like that, inherent in that framing is the fact that those two things are pulling against each other. They're somehow in conflict. And you need to find a way to balance work and life. But that's not the way it used to be. Like work and life, it's only fairly recent that those were two separate things. For most of human history, right? It was it's one thing. There's no work and life, there's just life. And in life, you make a living, you do things, but it's just life. It's one thing. And I think that fissure, that split, that work-life split is something that happened to us in the past few decades, largely driven by the way we did urban planning and offices and stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be that way. I want to let as many people as possible go back to just having life. And in that life, they do meaningful work and they're well, compensated for it, but it's life. It's one thing. It's not work-life balance, it's work-life integration, or it's just life.
You've given folks the opportunity to live the lives they deserve and that they want.
We're trying to, yeah.
That is so cool. So, as you said, you're here in Bentonville. Here you are, the co-founder and CEO of a Bay Area company, but you're in Bentonville. Take us through the journey a little bit more, if you will, of what led here. How did you hear about Bentonville in the first place?
Well, I heard about it because my partner's brother-in-law got a job at a company here. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Walmart.
I've heard of it.
Is that how you say it? And when we were looking to just go somewhere quiet for a few months, we were in San Francisco, they said, yeah, it's nice here. You get an Airbnb, you can have a tree in your backyard. I mean, we kind of figured everything was locked down during the pandemic, so it didn't matter where we were. I just wanted someplace quiet. Mm-hmm. So loaded up the car, drove from San Francisco to here, and that was it. And we literally didn't think for more than a few hours about whether we should come to Bentonville, because it was such a low stakes move. It was just I don't want to stay in the middle of the Mission District in San Francisco.
Right.
And any place we go to is not going to be that different, because we're going to be just staying inside and only there for a few months. So who cares? Why overthink it? So we just did it, and it was great. And then when we got here, for the first couple of months, we pretty much just stayed, inside or in the yard and ordered food, and it was nice. But as things started to open up a little bit, and we started to go outside and eat out and meet a lot of people here and kind of really get embraced by the community, I just kind of thought, yeah, this is just super nice. And so we planned on trying a few different cities before we decided where we wanted to be, but it just turned out like, no, this is pretty great. So let's just go. Let's just say that we're here.
You struck gold on the first try.
Yeah, I got lucky. The goal was not to overthink it. I think had I actually had I put in as much effort into deciding where to move as I do when I'm like researching what pocket knife to buy on Amazon, I couldn't have gotten around to moving here, because I would have been like, oh, but do I want this kind of pocket clip, or that steel, or this other steel? I kind of obsess over random decisions, and so the only reason we were here is because it was such a low stakes thing, because we didn't think we would stay, that it was just easy. So I'm glad that I didn't think this was going to be permanent, or else I probably would never have pulled the trigger to come here.
Well, that's cool. You've kind of mentioned some of the ways, but how has Bentonville changed you personally and professionally?
Well, but I think those two things are the same, personally and professionally for me. I think I'm lucky enough to, again, not make that distinction. It's just life, and if it's important to me, I'm probably working on it, just because why not? And I think, well, for one thing, this is the first time where I really feel like I kind of care about my physical community, and like I know my neighbors. I never used to know my neighbors before, literally. I think this is the first time where I know who my neighbors are. Wow. Because I'm living in, I was living in San Francisco and in Boston and New York, always kind of big cities, and I never knew my neighbors. I never really cared, and I never even like went out to eat near where I lived, because I would eat out all the time, but I would eat out like for work when I was traveling near the office. So like where I actually lived, like I barely lived there. I just slept there. It didn't matter to me. And so the actual physical, like the community, there was no community. And here, for the first time, it's like, well, yeah, I'm here. I'm here most of the time. I live here. I work here. So I know who my neighbors are. I recognize people on the street. And it's an actual physical community, in the sense that like the person serving me pizza at the Meteor is someone that I see all the time, just kind of walking around town. It's not like a physically separate set of people like it would be in San Francisco. Like in San Francisco, if you're going into a restaurant, like the waiter at the restaurant is probably commuting for 2 hours just to get there. You never encounter those people in normal life. So it's been really eye-opening to live in, it's almost like Bentonville is like the opposite of the metaverse. It's like an actual physical community of people who live near each other. And that's cool. I've never had that before.
I'll take the opposite of the metaverse. I'm not really buying it yet.
Me too.
All I got to say is, if the metaverse is what I've seen so far, which is essentially Second Life rebirth, I want no part of that.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that.
Sounds like Northwest Arkansas has had some surprises for you. How else has this place surprised you? What's the biggest way it surprised you?
I mean, the main way that it surprised me is that, is that we're here, we're here and we like it here, and we're building a house and, planning on just staying. Like I didn't expect that. And it was, I'd spend my whole life never really thinking about where do I want to live. Like I never asked myself that question, where do I want to live? Because work was always much more important to me, and work was always tied to a particular location. And so it didn't really matter where I lived. I never even thought to like have preferences. It was like, well, where do I want to work? Well, I was doing tech startups, and so San Francisco was the best place to do that. So I needed to be in San Francisco. Did I like living in San Francisco? Not really. I mean, parts of it are really nice, but there's parts to like about it. There's a lot of parts not to like about it. But it like I never even considered that I had the agency to think like that. And so it's been a complete revelation to just be like, well, yeah, where do I want to live, and what kind of a place do I want it to be? And then once you kind of start thinking about that, like, I don't know, I just start caring a lot more about the local ballot initiatives and, what gets permitted where. And it's like, I kind of feel like there's all these things that like normal people, you see on TV shows, normal people caring about, but I was always like, I don't know what any of that is. That's not for me. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm a person who lives in a neighborhood, in a house, and has issues and neighbors, and I don't know. It's very cool. And I think it really influences the way that we think about building the companies and the products, right? Because we are trying to make products that kind of give you back that real life, and give you the option, and give people and give companies the option to do really productive, very high value work without disrupting that.
Yeah, that's a great way to live. I too have lived around a few places around the country. Went to New Orleans, Nashville, Chicago, Denver.
Yeah.
stayed in Memphis a lot longer than I did the rest of those places, but it wasn't until we came here that I felt that same sense of community, and that my wife, who I've been married to for 3 years, but I've known probably 10, that she's told me that same thing. It's the first time she's felt that sense of community somewhere.
Right.
And as somebody who, by the way, isn't from the U.S., it's really been different for her in that way. Tell me a story. Something where you look at it and you think, gee, that's a hashtag because Bentonville moment. Maybe it's unique to here or it could only happen here. It tells the essence of this place.
Well, we went out, I guess it's not in Bentonville because this is on Beaver Lake. So we decided once in a while we'll rent a cabin for a week up in near Eureka Springs in Beaver Lake. And it's great because I can work from the cabin. I can work from anywhere, so why not work from a cabin?
Sure.
And it's like very, very nice. We're actually going out there in a couple of weeks. It should be peak foliage season. And,
nice.
I'm not taking the time off. I'll be working, but I'll be working sitting among the most beautiful scenery. And it's just like, it's very calming. Like I'm just in a much better mood when I'm over there. And a few weeks ago, we were out on the lake and we went out with some friends on a pontoon boat, which I didn't even know what pontoon boats were. But we went out on a pontoon boat and got to the middle of the lake and broke down. And the boat kind of broke down and wasn't going anywhere. And we were kind of stuck in the middle of the lake. And we had this feeling of like, I kind of knew that nothing bad was going to happen. I'm not sure why I knew that, but I was like, yeah, it's fine. Like worst case scenario, like I think I can swim, so I can probably just, swim to the lake. And we hung out on this boat, and sure enough, about a half hour later, this other couple came by on their boat and asked us if we needed any help, and then towed us to the dock. And the whole time was just this like very pleasant, on a boat with some beer, good friends, good company. Things are kind of going wrong, but not that badly. Like it's all sort of fine. And then we had complete strangers come and bail us out. It was just kind of perfect. Like it's in some sense, a very mundane story, but that didn't happen to me very much before.
That is so cool, and that is very hashtag because Bentonville or hashtag because Northwest Arkansas. Really, I think of this place as Northwest Arkansas think of that as the city, and Bentonville and Rogers and Lowell and Springdale and Fayetteville and the other towns are really, they're the neighborhoods, right? There's something there for everybody.
Well, if I had come to Bentonville, let's say 3 years ago, kind of before COVID, before all this out of office change, I would have thought, I think, that Bentonville was exceptional, meaning, hey, it's really cool, but it can't be duplicated. It's like, it's really exceptional, it's really cool, it's unique, and it's because we've had, decades of investment by, a couple of companies, really one big company by, one big family, very concentrated decades of, public investment and philanthropy has really made it a unique and exceptional place. But now I don't really think, like now, 3 years later, I don't think it's exceptional. I think it's a prototype. It's like of what's possible for the next 100 small cities in the U.S. Because of the out-of-office changes, because more and more people, not everyone, but more and more people will be able to live where it's nice to live and still hold whatever job they want to hold. You don't need a single large corporation. You don't need a single family to provide the kind of economic basis to have places be this nice. I think we can have lots of places become as nice as Bentonville. And Bentonville goes from being exceptional to just being a prototype. It's pointing towards a happy vision of small city U.S. And to me, that's actually much more interesting. Like I'm actually much less interested in exceptional places because they're kind of a curiosity. But if literally you can never reproduce it, like there's not that much you can learn. Like so what? Maybe you're lucky enough to live here. But the reason that I'm so interested in Bentonville now, and the reason that I'm investing here and we're building companies here, is I don't think it's exceptional. I think it is a prototype of what can be exported to another 100, small cities all over the U.S. and eventually all over the world, and it's gonna change the way that I think hundreds of millions of people live.
Wow, thinking about from a retail perspective, Bentonville changed the world. I believe because some things that are happening here I'll flip it over the wellness and healthcare space. We're going to change the world. And yet another way that we're really changing the world, thinking about, I haven't thought about it that way, I tell folks I don't want us to be the next Austin. I don't want us to be the next San Francisco. I want us to be the next best version of us. Other cities can think that way, but I would love it if we were, like you said, a prototype, the way that it ought to be done, and that people can use and model to build their own best thing.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Since you arrived here on the scene in Bentonville, I've noticed you've been out in the community doing some things with startups, with the educational ecosystem and so on. Could you tell us about that, about your opportunities that you've had to work with those areas?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to be invited to help out with some classes at the University of Arkansas here. I co-taught a class at the business school last semester with Dean Waller about important questions in distributed work. We got to experiment with some of our philosophies for how to structure efficient communication. There were hybrid, some in person, some on video. I've participated in a bunch of startup competitions and events, and yeah, it's just been really cool to see the entrepreneurial ecosystem here, and we're building some stuff here. So we're working on some restaurants. We're working on some other ideas. We didn't expect to be doing any work here. But I guess it's kind of like, when like mafia, members, when they go into the witness protection program and they get relegated to some small town. At first they're like, they don't do anything, but eventually they're going to wind up holding up trucks because it's just what you do. It's the life. I kind of feel the same way. It's like if we weren't planning on actually doing any business here, but we're here and it's the life, and there's so much stuff to do. There's such an appetite to actually invest in things and do things, and things that are more like real world things, not just doing software. That is great. So it's been really cool to see the entrepreneurial ecosystem, to be welcomed by it, and to have an opportunity to participate in it. So I'm intending on doing a bunch of stuff here.
Awesome. Well, as an economic developer, that just makes my soul very happy. What is, coming from a place like San Francisco, from the Valley, what has surprised you about the startup ecosystem here?
Honestly, the startups here are they're just as good and just as stupid as the startups in San Francisco and anywhere else. For the most part, startups are dumb. They're supposed to be. There's nothing particularly unique about the ones in the Bay Area or in San Francisco or anywhere else. I do think that there's a few things that I think Silicon Valley gets right, and there's a whole bunch of things that I think Silicon Valley gets wrong. And I think here it's there's a little bit of each. The companies that I've seen here tend to focus on more real problems. And the companies that I've seen, the startups that I've seen in the Bay Area and in San Francisco tend to chase opportunities more than focus on problems. I prefer to focus on problems. So I'm kind of getting more of that here. The flip side, I think, here people are more conditioned to maybe be more modest, more reasonable in their plans, which I actually think is often a mistake for startups. It's often easier to do the much more ambitious thing than the sensible thing, because you don't really do anything yourself anyway. So it's all about how many people you're going to talk into it, and it's easier to convince people to go on this crazy journey with you if it's a really epic journey than if it's something reasonable. So one of the things that Silicon Valley does really well, I think, is startup founders tend to think really big. And here, I think people have been conditioned to be I'm gonna self-censor a little bit. I'm gonna be a little bit more modest, and I think that's actually often stands in people's way. I would encourage everyone to, you have an idea. I would encourage everyone to think about what is ridiculously the most ambitious version of that idea, and what is the biggest, most ambitious version of this idea that you can possibly imagine, and then do one click less than that, just step back, just dial it up to 11 and then notch it down to 10. Whereas often here, I think people will maybe start at a 3 or 4 in ambition. But the ecosystem's strong everywhere. But ultimately, what I've realized is I don't care. I don't care where companies are. I don't care about Northwest Arkansas as a great place to make companies. I care about Northwest Arkansas as a great place to live. And companies are just made of people. And if it's a great place for people to live, I don't care where they work. They live here. And more they're going to be working near where they live, because a lot of us are doing that. And so where is a company headquartered? Where is other people? It doesn't matter. Like what matters is what's a great place to live. I think cities are going to start competing not based on what companies they can attract, but on what people can they attract. Like they're going to start competing not based on like tax breaks for companies. They're going to start competing based on quality of life for people, and that's great because like ultimately it's all just us. It's all just people. Even companies are just people. So I think it's very healthy if when places start really competing with each other, boasting about really trying to optimize for the quality of life of the people that live here, and that'll be the next version of economic development, which is different from what it used to be before, because before you had to start thinking about the company first.
That's right.
Now you start thinking about the people.
Yeah. I mean, I think, goodness, I'm not a traditional economic developer. I mean, this is my first economic development job. I've been doing it 2 years. And I, in some ways, don't look at myself as an economic developer. I'm just trying to help people live the lives they want and, in a place where we can do that. Just this morning was talking with folks about this whole concept of, we need to create the experiences people want. We need to make sure this is an amazing place to live. And that makes everything else take care of itself these days.
Right. I think that's right.
Yeah. So we talked about startups. Let's go back to education a moment. What surprised you so far about education, whether it's University of Arkansas or I'm sure you're familiar with the Ignite program, the CAPS program we have here? Yeah,
it's interesting. I did some stuff at the University of Arkansas last semester, and that was great. That was really fun. And we had this whole way of teaching the class that was again a hybrid of video and not. And then this summer I was back. I spent a month back in the Bay Area. I attended this Stanford program where I took some classes at Stanford. And that was much more of the traditional, like we were just sitting in a lecture room with someone lecturing. And the surprising thing for me was just how weird and unnatural that felt. Because I was like, wait, what's going on? Like this guy is speaking way too slowly and I can't fast forward it. And this is weird. And then somebody interrupts him to ask a question, but it's a dumb question. And I'm like, wait, I have to sit here while this person asks a dumb question. I can't just skip to the next question. I don't care about this question. And so there was parts of that whole synchronous, everything is in person experience that were actually just inferior. Now parts of it were brilliant. And some of it we did very hands-on exercises at Stanford, and it was great. And it was like, oh yeah, I'm really glad we're here in person and not doing this on Zoom or something. But parts of it didn't make any sense at all after what we had just done at the University of Arkansas. And I didn't really realize that because I didn't realize that until I got to Stanford and was like, well, actually, wait, in many ways, this is worse. And so I guess it's very much to the credit to Dean Waller and to the school there about how open-minded they were and just trying all of this new stuff, that it was actually still very cutting edge. We didn't think of it that way. That's how we think about doing stuff. But they were very open-minded. They tried stuff that really hasn't been tried in most schools. I think it worked pretty well. I think we're going to make it better and better. And it didn't come as a surprise to me until I was back in the traditional environment and had the contrast of being yeah, I think I was actually learning a lot more back in Fayetteville than I am here.
Yeah, that was unexpected. I didn't expect to basically hear you say, my surprise came at Stanford.
Yeah.
That's great. Sort of changing chapters on this episode. And since we can't do founder therapy, which is, maybe I'll found that company one day, just call it founder therapy. Let's do founder advice.
Yeah.
I often ask folks like you about first-time founder advice, but you're a serial entrepreneur, and I'd like a serial entrepreneur. And so I'd like to know from you how your ventures have differed, or I guess the question I'm looking for is there one secret formula for success, or are there many, or is each one just unique? Or the better way of putting it or thinking about it is, how has the experience changed for you each time?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot. I think of it I think we have a pretty unrealistic expectation for what being a founder or being an entrepreneur is in society, and we kind of fetishize certain things that are probably not right. Think about it like this. Let's say you're a skier. Forget about Sutterford. Let's say you're a skier. Let's say you're in your early 20s, and you are a great skier. Well, I am definitely not. I've been skiing once in my life, never doing it again. But let's just say you're an amazing skier, and you could ski whatever moguls or bumps. You're like Olympic level, and you're there skiing. You're 22, and you kind of know that you're banging up your knees because it's skiing. It's a physical thing. You're obviously like banging up your knees, and like it's okay. You take care of your knees a little bit, but that 30 years later, when you're in your 50s, like, are you going to be a better skier at 50 than you are at 20? Like, no. No one's going to be like, oh my God, you must be such a better skier. You've got 30 more years of skiing experience than you did in your 20s. Like, yeah, okay, in some sense, you're probably better because you have 30 years of skiing experience. But in much more important real senses, you're nowhere near as good because you're not 20 years old anymore. You don't have the same knees. You don't have the same muscles. And people understand that because they think, well, knees are hardware. So, of course, it's going to get banged up. But when people think about being a founder, being a CEO, they kind of think that like, well, but your brain is software. Mm-hmm. But it's not. Your brain is also hardware. There's nothing magical about your brain that's like not true about your knees. They also get banged up. And so when people say like, oh, well, like, fifth time start, I've been a CEO for 30 years. Like you must be so much better at it. Like, no, I'm not. I'm not better at 50 than I was when I was 20. Just like you wouldn't expect a skier to be better at 50 when they were 20. Yeah, I know a few more things. And so maybe there's like certain skills that I have that are different that I've developed, but I definitely, there's many things that I'm worse at. And it is a physical activity. And it is a brutally difficult physical activity. And I think a lot of problems that founders have is because like society doesn't quite understand this. It doesn't realize that, like just that it is pretty punishing. And you can't, just like you couldn't ski the same way at 50 as you could when you were 20, you can't CEO the same way either. You need to find a different way of doing it if you're going to be productive at all. And I think from that observation, there's like a lot of things that fall out of that, including like my biggest general advice to founders or people thinking about starting a company for the first time is just don't do it. Like, just don't do it, man. It's not worth it. Like, just say no. Get a job. Like, why are you doing this? It's really, really hard. Your chances of success are very, very small. You're going to pay the price, regardless of whether you succeed or fail. You're going to pay a very serious price for doing it. So don't do it. Like, seriously, like if you're going to like take one thing from this interview, it's like, do not do it. Don't start a company. Just say no. Or certainly don't do it for the wrong reason. And I think a lot of the reasons that people have are the wrong reasons. The most common one is people may think that it's a good way to make money. And it's just not, right? We all know that like the vast majority of startups fail. Like it's not like your expected lifetime net earnings are not increased if you waste a decade trying to make a company, right? Mm-hmm. Some people make money, but very, very few. So if you want to make money, like rise through the corporate ranks at Walmart or something. Don't bother starting a company. Some people think they want to start a company because maybe they think that it's like a good way to like wield power. You want to be the boss. And like, come on, it's not, right? Like when you're running your own company, everyone's your boss. Like all of your employees, all your customers, everyone in the media, right? It's like an inverse pyramid. You're like you're the guy all the way at the bottom, and literally every single other person is your boss. I mean, they get to like tell you what to do, and that's like what it feels like. So like all of these are pretty bad reasons for starting a business, and most people start businesses for these bad reasons because they think it's kind of cool, and it's not. So I guess my main advice is don't do it. If you're gonna do it anyway, because you can't not do it, because you've got some problem that you're so in love with that you're like, I have to do this, I can't not do this, then then we can talk. There's other things to know that might make it a little bit less damaging, a little bit more likely to succeed, but only around the edges. Like it's still gonna be damaging and you're still probably gonna fail. So that's kind of the main thing is like, don't start a company unless you're working on something that in full knowledge of the price that you're going to pay, you still do it because you can't not do it because it's so worthwhile.
Much more eloquently that word I can't say today, put than I could ever put it. I've advised, counseled, mentored a fair number of entrepreneurs, more than 1,000 in a decade. Yeah. And one of the first things I usually tell them when they're really, really early stages, congratulations, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And then we back into why, there's a good chance of that and whether they want to do it. And then we get to find out. Putting on your investor hat, what's the one thing, and I know there are many things, but what's the one thing that startups must do to get venture capital investment in particular?
Well, I don't think startups need to have venture capital investment. I think
Yes.
you should decide if that's what you want. It's not right for every startup. I do think that there's my most actually useful piece of advice, which is the advice that comes right after what you just asked me, which is, let's say you got venture capital investment. What do you do after? This I'm totally serious about. Feel free to ignore your investors as soon as they've given you money. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to take their phone calls. You don't have to have them tell you what to do. You can completely ignore them. It does not matter. Like, if you are stressed out because you've got like an investor that's just like, after they've already invested in you, just ignore them. Because the only thing you need, you don't need their introductions. You don't need any of that stuff. All you need from them is, when you do the next round, you want to put in more money. They will do that if your company is succeeding by the time you do the next round. And if your company is succeeding and you've completely ignored them, they're still going to put money in. And they're not going to do that if your company's not succeeding, regardless of like how much you've paid attention to them and how many of their calls you've taken. So if your company's not doing well, they're not going to be like, yeah, I'll put more money in anyway, just because you've always done what I've asked you to do. So once you have investors, talk to them when they're useful. And as soon as they stop being useful, just feel free to ignore them. And it's literally like a superpower. It's just like, yeah, I mean, I tell this to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they're kind of surprised. Like, you can do this? I'm like, yeah, of course you can do this. Why? In fact, why wouldn't you? In terms of how to get investors, I mean, that's a whole other thing. I would say the most important thing is to understand that your job is Okay, let me back up from that. So I was a VC, as you said, for a couple of years, and I did some math. I was an early stage tech VC, so I did seed rounds and A rounds mostly, a little bit of B rounds, but mostly seed and A. And at a top firm, at General Catalyst. And during a year, I interacted with about 3,000 startups. And that wasn't that atypical. It's pretty standard for like an early stage VC. You're gonna see about 3,000 startups a year. Out of those 3,000, I had meetings with about 600. So the rest of them were, just send me a pitch or something. But I had meetings with about 600. And out of those 600, I would invest in 2 or 3. So the funnel was basically 3,000 to 3. Again, very typical. It's not like it was nothing exceptional, as you know. That's just what the numbers are. So now think of that from the entrepreneur's perspective. If you want me to invest, you have to be the most impressive thing I've seen all year. Literally. If you're not the most impressive that I've seen all year, it's just not going to work. If you're the most impressive pitch I've seen today, that's nowhere near good enough. If you're the most impressive pitch I've seen this month, it's nowhere near good enough. You've got to be the most impressive thing I've seen all year, or you're not going to get an investment. And that's just how it works for early stage stuff. So what do you learn from that? I think there's 2 things. First is you got to ask yourself a really hard question. Who am I going to be impressive to? And what exactly about this is going to be the most impressive thing they've seen all year? And like those 2 things like really go hand in hand, because like not everyone is impressed by the same things. So first, you got to make sure that like you're talking to people who might think that you're the most impressive presentation that they've seen all year. And then second of all, well, what is it about your presentation that's going to meet that bar? And if you're not going to meet that bar, then don't waste your time. You're not going to get that investment. The main thing that kind of comes out of all that is this understanding that it's like, if you're an entrepreneur, you're pitching an early stage investor, your main job is, you're the entertainment. Your main job is just to not be boring, because everything else is. So if you can at least stand out by being like the most entertaining pitch they've seen all year, then at least you have a shot. There's lots of other ways you can be impressive as well. But that's the main thing. It's like, just be realistic about it. How are you the most impressive thing that this person has seen all year? Why? And if you don't have a good answer, then you're not. Then don't waste your time.
Wow. So I've heard 2 really amazing pieces of almost backwards advice here. Ignore your investors and just be impressive. And they're wonderfully freeing pieces of advice, because all that other garbage that founders have to go through because of following the advice that doesn't say that. It's really freeing.
Yeah, I mean, look, ignore them after they've given you money if they're not being helpful. Obviously, if they are, then
of course,
that's great. Yeah. I think that's right. I think it's like, for example, every time I like judge some kind of a pitch competition or something like that, there's always a slide that has the TAM, the total addressable market.
Yes,
right? Everyone's got
favorite.
the TAM slide, right? I have never, ever in my life made a TAM slide. I've never done it. I've never done it. I'm never going to do it. I've never presented one. I've never made one. I've never paid attention when someone else has presented one to me. No one ever has. No one in the history of the universe has ever looked at a TAM slide and had anything to say about it, other than, if you're just like in the business of giving general advice, and you can say like, oh, you need a TAM slide. No, you don't. You don't need one, because you can't possibly be impressive. Because either you're talking to someone who doesn't understand how big the opportunity is, in which case nothing you can do is going to get them to invest in. You shouldn't be talking to them in the first place. Or you're talking to someone who does understand how big the opportunity is, in which case, what's the point of it? So like, you're going to have a few minutes to be among the most impressive things that they've seen. Why would you waste any amount of that on something as generic as some kind of Venn diagram intersection, showing the total addressable market of something? Looked at from that lens, it really is clarifying. It really, but it's a little bit harsh too, because it means that most people, they shouldn't be wasting time because they're not going to be that impressive. But if you want to be, there's ways to do it.
Awesome. Okay, here's a question that I think I've only ever asked one time before on this podcast, and I probably should ask everybody about it, because there's, in my mind, probably the greatest learning experiences come from failure. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to know, I'm sure you have at least a couple of stories of failure. I would welcome the opportunity to hear a story of perhaps even epic failure, some significant story of failure, and how did it shape the way that you behave or think or what you believe?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say about that. One thing that's probably worth talking about is just this concept that you learn a lot from failure, because you do. It's totally true. Mm-hmm. It's totally true. Also learn a lot from Wikipedia, which that's is often cheaper than failing. So
yes.
Almost all the time that you hear someone say that they learned a lot from failure, it's like, okay, yeah, that's interesting, but like, if your goal is to learn a lot, you don't actually need to like do something to fail. You could just read about it, and it's going to be almost as good and a lot cheaper. So I think part of this is from that mythos, the fetishization of startups that says that failure is okay. That, well, look, you don't really get penalized for failure, and so you start a company and fail, so what's the big deal? You don't get penalized and you learn a lot. No, it is a big deal. Failure really, really, really hurts. Startup failure is brutal, it's damaging, it ruins people. Not to say that it ruins everyone, but it damages a lot of people in very serious ways. Damages their health, damages their relationships, damages them financially, damages their reputation. Not all the time, and not everyone to the same amount, but it's painful. And like we shouldn't brush it away. It's another one of these reasons where I'd say like don't just start a company on a whim, because like it's hard. Startup failure is brutal. Startup success is worse. Right? Like if you think failure is hard, try succeeding. Like that's what breaks relationships and damages people. Because man, like if you're actually succeeding, like failing is easy. You don't do anything. You just fail. You just sit back and fail, whatever. Like it hurts, but you don't, easy to succeed at failing. Succeeding, on the other hand, when you're not in danger of going out of business, when it's not an existential decision, when you're just really trying to figure out, well, what's the best thing I could be working on today? Nothing I'm going to do today is going to kill the company. Therefore, what's the most important thing I should be doing? Man, that is so much more stressful.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So a lot of this is like, again, it's, you can almost feel like this is the scared straight, talk for founders, where it's like, it's going to cost you a lot. You go on this journey, you're going to pay a lot. You're probably going to pay a lot and not get anything out of it. Mm-hmm. But if you do succeed, you're going to pay even more, because it's just like, it's tough. Having said that, obviously failure happens all the time, and it's a thing that you just have to accept. It's so painful failing. I would only ever want to do it for things that are so important to me that it's worth paying that price, which really constrains the kinds of stuff that I would work on. And I guess the most important thing when you're failing is to recognize when it's happening, just so that you can give up, you can quit sooner rather than later. Again, we have this like I think fetish towards always stick with it. Never take no for an answer.
Right.
No, God, usually take no for an answer. No is a great answer almost all the time. It's great. If you know you're going to fail anyway, if you're more likely to, you're much better off getting it out of the way sooner rather than later, because then you have got more time to do other things. In fact, at Old Turtles, we have a whole taxonomy of startup failures. When we hear a pitch at Old Turtles, we have this taxonomy that we've developed so that we know how to talk about it internally, about what is the most likely way for it to fail. And we do that so that we know what to work on first. Because we always want to work on the thing that's most likely to make you fail. We always want to run at the hardest problems first, because if they're the hardest problems, and if that's what's going to kill us, let it have us kill us sooner rather than later, so that we can have as much of our lives left to do other things. Yes. So we look at a startup pitch and we'll classify. We'll say, oh, that's a Costner, or that's a new Coke, or that's a flying shoe, as a way to focus. Each of these things means something in Old Turtles language, is a way to focus what to work on. So we are almost anticipating where the most likely failures are, so that we can run at those things first. And if we happen to survive them, then we can work on other stuff. But yeah, I mean, I've failed at a tremendous number of things, do all the time. Most of the anecdotes aren't they're not particularly charming or funny. They're just painful. You put your life into something and it doesn't work out. I think everyone has failed at huge numbers of things. I think I've also been lucky enough and privileged enough to have some successes, and those two things aren't necessarily flip sides of each other. So I would say, if you're going into a startup, you're going to fail. That's guaranteed. Failure is guaranteed. Success is not guaranteed. You may fail a bunch and then also succeed a little bit, or you may fail a bunch and not succeed at all. But yeah, getting comfortable, getting your head around what failure means and how to deal with it is very important, because that's basically the life you're setting out for if you decide to do this.
Excellent. All right. There's a question I've been working on that I haven't found the answer to, and so you're going to have to make the question. I've asked several people, what's a question that I should ask Phil that nobody else has asked him?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a good question.
This is the question I totally didn't prepare you for.
Yeah. I don't know if it was that. Did you prepare me for any other questions, or were there
I don't
notes
think so.
I was supposed to read that I didn't read? 'Cause, everyone. I don't know, man. That's good. I kind of have I kind of think the world for me is divided into kind of two parts. There's stuff that I decide is not important to me. And that stuff, sometimes I know a lot about it, sometimes I don't know anything about it, but it's okay. And if I happen to know, for example, Star Wars. Star Wars is not that important to me. I just happen to know a lot about it because I'm a giant Star Wars fan. So I can talk about various aspects of Star Wars endlessly. But it's not that important to me. I just know a lot about it. There's other stuff that I'm not important about that I don't know anything about. And then there's stuff that that is important to me, that I've decided is important to me. And those things, I know every single thing to extreme detail, because I couldn't tolerate not knowing something. If something is important to me and I get this feeling that I'm living in some kind of sense of mystery, something is vague, there's something is cloudy, something is foggy, then it's I literally have an allergic reaction to it. I'm just going to work ceaselessly to clarify whatever those points are. And it doesn't leave much room for things that I like but that aren't important to me. I tend to, with very small exceptions like Star Wars, I tend to just if something is important to me, I'll sooner or later wind up working on it professionally, just because everything just kind of gets sucked into that vortex. And so it's a good question to be well, what are some of the things I like that I don't work on, and why not? Why aren't I working on them? And am I going to start? Or should there be more things that are just hobbies or interests that I don't ever work on? Is that kind of a freeing thing? I don't know. I haven't really thought about it much. I wind up spending the vast majority of my time talking about things that that I think are important to me and that I'm just kind of living in day and night, and would be interesting to sometimes have a conversation about some of the more superfluous stuff that's just interesting.
I think this is a good way to wrap up the show. Maybe one day we'll have you on again. I'll ask you that question again and see what comes out.
I'll prepare for it better next time.
That's great. You did great. Thanks, Phil, for spending so much time with me and the Beacon. What's this podcast? The Bentonville Beacon audience.
Thank you.
Today, I feel like we're really blessed to live in a place where we can live life. I was going to say work and play and all those words that we all use, but to live life in a place where we can actually do that. And, from time to time, I catch you on some other shows. I've checked in on some places where you've talked, and I hear you talk about Bentonville or Northwest Arkansas. And, I'm paid to tell people how amazing this place is. And it just doesn't fall the same, right, as when you say it. You're sharing the story of your own free will. And I appreciate that, especially really selfishly as an economic developer. I appreciate it because it makes my life easier. But I also appreciate and am deeply grateful that you share this story, because I think people need to know. They need to know they can live life differently, whether it's here or wherever. I
think it's a really cool place. I'm very grateful to everyone that's welcomed me here and made us feel welcome. It's been really made us feel like we belong. This is actually really cool. At the Momentary, right, which is right across the street from our offices. It's got the big "You Belong Here," right, art. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to one of my board members, and she had done a lot of work on with special forces teams and elite athletes and all sorts of elite organizations, which is the kind that I'm trying to make some of our companies. And she said, there's a big difference between belonging to something and feeling like you're included. And she said, do you know what the difference is between belonging and being included? And I said, no, what? She said, you can only belong to something that you help create. And I thought that was really kind of corny, but also awesome and true and good. And this is exactly right. I feel like I belong here, and I feel that way because I have the opportunity to co-create it. It wasn't just being welcomed in and being invited. It's not a passive thing. It is an act of collaborative creation. We can create this place the way we want it to be. And that's the only way we can belong to a place, is if we help create it. And then we can use that as a model for the next 100 small cities in the U.S.
Wow. That just happens to be my favorite piece of art in town. And I love that you've said this, because I also believe, and I've been telling people, that the folks who are attracted to Bentonville themselves are builders, and builders by nature are actually givers. Probably some of the biggest givers there are. They just give of themselves, and it's part of the building process. And you're right, you can't belong unless you're part of creating. And so that sign has this, in that way, this, I don't know if circular is the right word, way of proving itself out every day. Just want to thank you also real quick for your commitment to the startup community and the help you've given there, as well as the part to the University of Arkansas, your help with them. I think that's wonderful. So I guess I'm a little late to the show saying this. Welcome home.
Thank you.
To our Bentonville Beacon audience, thanks for sharing your time for another episode. I'd love it if you could do me 2 favors. Neither of those favors include cash or your social security number or your firstborn child. They're pretty simple. The first one is share this episode and others with your friends, whether that's by text or email or social media is even better. And come back to hear more stories from Bentonville's leaders and businesses, and to hear how Northwest Arkansas is a place where you can get more of what you want and less of what you don't. And of course, check out all the episodes at BentonvilleEconomicDevelopment.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast. Great. See you next time.